Hi, I'm Kevin Scott with 100 Huntley Street. We are here today with Mark Batterson, the pastor of National Community Church in Washington, D.C. Mark, we're so glad to be with you today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Well, let's start off by talking about a little bit about your church and your ministry and how God called you to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting pastoring a church in the capital of the United States. You know, we often say that our local news is national news, and we love it. You know, the Capitol's in our backyard. We live about 12 blocks from the Capitol building itself, and we feel like God's put us there to be able to influence influencers. And while I know that most of the news coming out of D.C. is political, we're praying for revival in our nation's capital, and we're seeing the beginning of that, and God's moving in a great way.
Yeah, that's really cool. Tell me a little bit about your ministry philosophy. I know you guys have 7 locations, but you don't own any of those. You own a coffee shop, I believe. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jesus didn't just hang out in the synagogue. He hung out at wells. Wells were natural gathering places in ancient culture, and so I think coffee houses are postmodern wells. And so why not build a coffee house where the church and community can cross paths? And so we've had 1 million customers walk through our doors. It's been voted the #1 coffee house in DC. And then every penny of profit we give to missions. So I'll tell you what, it's a pretty cool deal having an office too, right above a coffee house. I'm never more than like 15 seconds from caffeine. So
that's great.
We love it. And we do believe that the church ought to be the most creative place on the planet. Church belongs in the middle of the marketplace. And so that's some of what drives the way that we do church, meeting in movie theaters around the D.C. area. And so we're orthodox in belief, but maybe a little unorthodox in practice.
Yeah, tell me about how that works. You're in a movie theater. You guys show up on Sunday, and people just know to come to the theater for church?
Yeah, I mean, we have a little bit of fun with it. We'll occasionally, now meeting at a theater near you, National Community Church. And so we start on Saturday nights, and we'll record a message, and then that will go to our different venues. And of course, it'll go up on the big screen where I'm not live. And then we have a campus pastor and a worship band, and the Lord is blessing it, and so as long as He keeps blessing it, we'll keep launching new locations.
Great, great. So, Mark, you are the author of 11 best-selling books, and one of those is my favorite, which is In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day. It's an incredible book, but I know you have some new books out.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about The Grave Robber.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I'm impressed you remembered the title. Most people can't remember the full title of In a Pit, so well done. I think The Circle Maker is a book on prayer that the Lord has really used in a way that kind of was bigger than what I imagined. And so it's been fun to see a rising tide of prayer as a result of that book. But the latest book is The Grave Robber. It's a book on the 7 miracles in John, starting with Jesus turning water into wine, and then these incredible miracles where 2 fish, 5 loaves, and feeds 5,000 and has more left over than he started with. Of course, he walks on water, heals a man born blind, which is fascinating because that means there were no synaptic connections between the optic nerve and visual cortex in the brain. So, I mean, this is synaptogenesis. I mean, what a miracle. And then you get to John 11, and it's the Grim Reaper versus the grave robber. And you gotta love it. Jesus steals back what the enemy has stolen, and so we have a God who doesn't just make bad people good. He's a God who brings dead people to life, and so thus the title, The Grave Robber.
And Mark, my understanding is that you're trying to say that the Jesus from the Bible that we read about is the same Jesus that we have today, that His powers haven't changed or His abilities they're still there. Is that right?
Yeah. I think these aren't just past tense miracles. I think they're microcosms of what He wants to do in our lives, present tense. And so I'm afraid that many people have kind of cut Jesus off at the knees. When you cut out the miracles, what you're left with is a wise yet weak Jesus. And that is not the genuine Jesus. That's not the Jesus of the Gospels. The Jesus of the Gospels is someone who did miracle after miracle after miracle and then walked out of his own tomb. And so when he did that, to me, the word impossible doesn't belong in our vocabulary. The same God who made the laws of nature can break the laws of nature. And so I think my goal with the book is to really reintroduce this idea that he's the God who does miracles. Now, I do have to say, I put some caution tape at the beginning of the book that don't seek miracles, seek Jesus. And if you seek Jesus, if you follow him long enough and far enough, you're going to find yourself in the middle of some miracles.
Yeah. Mark, you talk about some things in an interesting way. You talk about very much a faith element of believing in something that is seemingly impossible, but you talk about it sometimes in a very intellectual or academic way. For sometimes people of faith, those two seem incongruous or like they don't match. Tell us kind of that journey and how you're able to communicate with a very intellectual audience, a message that some people may not understand or think fits with that.
Yeah. Well, I have a pretty simple philosophy that every ology is a branch of theology, that God created everything that is with 4 words, by the way, let there be light. And those 4 words, if the Doppler effect is true, it means that there are still galaxies being created at the outer edges of the universe. And so those 4 words are still creating all of these years later. Well, I believe that if you don't appreciate or understand a little bit of neurology, you're not going to fully understand that miracle in John 9 that I've already referenced. Even the idea of walking on water, or someone who has been an invalid for 38 years and thinking about the atrophy that must have taken place in the muscles and bones. I mean, if you're going to appreciate the God of the Bible, he first reveals himself as creator. And so I think the more I know about his creation, the greater appreciation I have. You know, an astronomer ought to be able to appreciate the God who keeps the planets in orbit and places the stars in the sky than someone who doesn't know anything about that. And so I guess I'm just someone that believes the more you know how much you don't know, and it really causes you to humble yourself before an almighty creator.
Yeah. Mark, I love the way that you communicate this. And you do such a great job in your books. When I finish one of your books, I want to go out, get up and go out and do something. Can you tell us a little bit about the writing process and how you take your voice and communicate that through a book?
Yeah, it's hard. It is hard to write, you know. I wish it got easier. And I, you know, like a lot of authors, you know, I love having written. I love that moment when you're done. But I'll tell you what my process looks like. I feel called to write. And so I honestly, I'm not writing for people who are going to read the book first and foremost. I'm writing as an act of obedience because I believe God's called me to write. And so when I get up early in the morning during a writing season, the first thing I'll do is take my shoes off because I feel like it's holy ground. And I really don't feel like I'm typing on a keyboard. I feel like I'm obeying God on a keyboard. I'm worshiping God. I'm praying on a keyboard, so that when those words end up in a book, I feel like God has somehow, some way anointed them. And then I'll tell you what I do. Then I pray, God, put this book in the right hands at the right time. And so many stories of God's impeccable timing where that book was really an answer to prayer. And so I literally, I don't view a book sold as a book sold. To me, it's a prayer answered, and I can't wait to see how God's going to use it in someone's life.
Wow. Now, you just ventured into something that's a little bit different, and you wrote a children's book. Tell us about that, and is that process different, and what made you want to write a book for children?
Yeah, well, first thing I want to say is had a wonderful co-author, Joel Clark, and what a fun venture. You know, I've been kind of in the realm of Christian living, nonfiction, but I think that one way that you reach the next generation is you reach out to their imagination. I mean, C.S. Lewis did that with an entire generation who read the Chronicles of Narnia. And I really believe that Jack Staples, now it's a trilogy. The first book is The Ring of Time. Okay. Kids are going to fall in love with this book. You know, and the target is kind of kids about 8 or 9 years old can generally read it and understand it, and even kids who are 15 or 16. In fact, even big kids who never quite grew up are going to love this book. It's great fiction, but I think there are subplots and themes that are going to bring certain spiritual truths to life in a way that maybe will come alive in the imagination of these kids.
Mark, give us a little sneak preview. What is the goal? What are you trying to get kids to walk away with?
Well, they're going to love the characters because you have kind of your unassuming heroes, the kids who step up to a challenge. Kids that maybe are kind of on the outside, maybe not in that popular group, but they're the ones with the courage to actually make a difference. So the characters they're going to love, from Jack to Alexia to even Mrs. Dunphy. But then some of the themes, well, one of the themes is the awakened are those whose scales have been removed from their eyes. Well, think 1 Corinthians. There is a veil that blinds us to the spiritual reality that is actually more real than the reality we can sense with our 5 senses. And so kids are going to love kind of those epic moments, epic characters, and I think really fall in love with Jack Staples.
Awesome. Let me ask you this as we close, Mark. What are you most excited about with the church as a whole and your church in particular? What excites you most right now?
Yeah, you know, my first thought is I've been pastoring this church for 18 years, and I think I was serving God more than seeking God, to be perfectly honest. And I think it's one of the challenges for those who are in professional ministry. And, you know, I'm just at a place in my life where I'm going after God. I love Jesus, and I love His Word, and the Bible says seek God first, not second or third or 10th. And if you seek Him first, all these other things will be added unto you. Everything takes care of itself if you seek the Lord first. And so I hope that's a word of encouragement to those who are listening.
I love it. What a great thought, that we need to seek first and then serve, but seek first the kingdom of God. Mark, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a privilege to be with you today.